Hello, everybody. Welcome. I'm Grandmaster Mircea Parligras, and today we're going to talk about the isolated pawn in the ending. So I chose a few interesting examples. Um, let's talk a little bit about the isolated pawn. Obviously, um, it is good to have an isolated pawn in the opening or in the middle game. And as you know, the side with the isolated pawn can try to mount an attack or has, for example, strong squares in the center because of the isolated pawn. So it's a lot about space advantage and dynamics. However, in the ending, once the queens are off, for example, um, it is. Hello there. It is not so good to have an isolated pawn, but it's not the end of the world either. So the side with the isolated pawn probably should activate the pieces and try not to get another weakness, like the isolated pawn being one weakness, and if he gets another weakness, then it's not good. The examples from today will be how to play against this isolated pawn. So first of all, we should blockade. We should stop the advance of the isolated pawn. So in this case, the isolated pawn is well defended. Hello there. How are you doing? Um, Also, it is. It is a good thing uh, to simplify to exchange some pieces, but we have to be careful which pieces to exchange. Especially, we should exchange the opponent's active pieces, and also, for example, the open file is important. And also a typical idea is to try to create a second weakness. For example, here we could try to create a second weakness by playing f3, g4 later on. Because with only one weakness, it's difficult to win such positions. And then there is another thing. If we blockade the pawn like we do here, for example, you can see we also control the c2 square, so it's not possible for a rook on the c file to get into our position. But if we block it, then we cannot really attack the pawn, so it's a trade-off. So if we want to take the pawn, then our knight should probably be on c3 or f4 in order to attack the isolated pawn. In this position, for example, the knight is nicely placed, but we need to play around it. Like maybe the point should be to try to get the file or to create a second weakness or something else, because we cannot attack the pawn directly. Look at this, the pawn is defended, although this bishop is quite bad, but it still defends the bishop, the pawn. Okay, so this is back to the game. This is a game, Capablanca versus Teichmann from 1913. So classical game played more than 100 years ago. Anyway, black is to move here. With his last move, black just exchanged the queens, which was definitely not a good idea. So he exchanged the queens on e2. And here, black to move just takes the c file in order to activate the rook and bring the king into play. So okay, my question to you is, what should white do? How do we proceed here? And yeah, you can write in the chat. So I explained the position a bit, and now up to you. to find the good moves, if there are any. Of a rook trade. Well, as I said, white should simplify the position, but if we exchange the rooks, then yeah, if we exchange the rooks, then we lose some of the dynamics of the position, and then maybe white is still slightly better, but you see black has the pair of bishops, and we cannot attack so easily the d5 pawn. So it is better to keep the rooks on the board. H3 for loose, but that's not particularly active. Well, yeah, H3 is not really active. It could be considered, but then it would give black time to go G6, for example. So yeah, knight F5. Yes, knight F5 is very good. This is what he played. I just want to mention that, for example, if knight F4, then there is G6 followed by king G7. Or exchanging this bishop is actually quite bad, because then black really has a pair of bishops. So knight F4, as I said, the activity of the pieces is very important in this type of positions. And here we have this opportunity to jump to F5, and we should go for it before black goes for G6 and take this opportunity. All right, now black played king f8 just to defend the bishop. There was my question to you is, what was the point of this? Why not bishop d8? What did white have in mind here? 96, very good. Yes, the point is 96, attacking both. Yeah, indeed, it activates the king if it takes on e7. Yeah, 96, then. Yes, actually, we eliminate this bad bishop, but there is another point here. Knight d4 you want. Well, if knight d4, we just exchanged a good knight for a so-called bad bishop, because it was on the same square as the isolated pawn. We get a file. Well, there is something else here. At some point we need to take material. So here it is possible to just take on f6. Yes, very good. Bishop f6 and then rook d5. And now you see bishop b2 is not possible, because so what happens if bishop b2? Checkmate. Very good, very good. Checkmate, guys. So it's not possible to take the b2 pawn. And then if black goes rook c7, for example, yes, very good. Then white can just go rook d2, and you see all these squares are defended, so black cannot enter with his rook. And then okay, it's white is a pawn up, and little by little can improve the position. All right, very good. So that in the game black played. I'm fine, thank you. Black played king f8, and now again we need to continue actively, because otherwise we might just not get much of an advantage. So in the game, white, can you help me? Is bishop f6 not possible? Well, bishop f6 then I guess just taking here. Yeah, and you see now the king is on f8, so we don't have the same idea as before, because now b2 is hanging, the king can escape, and actually maybe black could be even better here. But no, there is something else. Knight e d4. Yeah, probably knight e d4 also, but it would allow bishop d8. So in the game, white just thank you. White just took on e7. So now we have the opposite colored bishop, but our bishop is more active than the opposite bishop. So as I was saying, activity of the pieces is very important in these positions. Knight d4. It's difficult to win only because of the isolated pawn in the ending. So it has to be something else, like here. Okay, black has the file, but no points of entry on the open C file. Well, look at this, very active knight here and very annoying pin. While the black bishop here is not doing much, it's passive. All right, and here this knight f5 was again a threat, and it was quite annoying. Probably black could mark time with the more pieces leave the board. Yeah, okay, but now it's black to move. So black could go something like rook c5 or rook c4, but then you see knight f5, check, king here to defend the pawn. He could take on f6 and jump back with the knight. And then these pawns look very, very ugly. So black decided to defend against this and played g6. But now the pin is very, very unpleasant. And how do we continue here? Well, apparently we cannot reinforce this pin. There is no way to do something here. So the bishop is well placed. The knight is well placed here, controls also c2 square, keeps the pawn so as not to advance. But is not so active anymore because f5 pawn is f5 square, for example, is defended now. So as I said, we cannot win with just one weakness, so we need to create another weakness. Now it's time to 1 hour. The lecture lasts for 1 hour. We need to gain space on the king side. So there we go, f3 with idea to gain space, g4, h4, even king f2 to bring the king into the center. So this makes perfect sense. And here it's very difficult for black to make a move. For example, if he leaves the... he cannot play king e6 to unpin because of this knight. And if he goes rook h8, for example, to play h6, then we can move to the c file, threatening here. He has to go back. And well, no, this rook c1 is much stronger. So now take, and after king f2, the king intends to just go to e5, for example, and again the pin is very unpleasant. Probably he will have to go h6 and sack a pawn. So if we think about it, black's position is very difficult already. In the game, I think he took a practical decision and he played h6 here. Just give up a pawn. Alright, Capablanca took the pawn, what else? And now he played well, he played knight d7 just in time, because otherwise white goes back bishop g5 and there will never be this idea with h6 anymore. So knight d7. And okay, now we have now he managed to unpin. Maybe he's trying to bring the knight over there to c4, and there are opposite colored bishops. So h4. it was played knight c5, bishop f4, knight e6. Yeah, I think this is an important moment of the game, and here white. What did you do as white here, by the way, in this critical moment? But probably this critical moment was easily forgotten. So bishop g3. Yeah, bishop g3. I think it's bishop g3, but then he takes on d4, and probably he wants to go rook c2, something like that. Well, in the game, Capablanca decided to go for the opposite color bishop's ending, and he took on e6. I think this was maybe a good practical decision because he won the ending very easily. But I would prefer here knight b3. Take the knight and rook d2. Yeah, this is what he did. This is exactly what he did. He took the knight and rook d2. I think knight b3 or b3. Well, b3 could be the same. Take here and try to go rook c2 or something. Maybe b3 could make sense, because when you take here, you could take with the e-pawn and then try to play rook e1. Anyway, I just think knight b3 is much stronger, because now bishop e5 is threatened. Also, in some cases, it could be rook d2, for example, or even knight a5 sometimes. So we just avoid the opposite card bishop's endings. And this would be good. But as I said, Capablanca just took on e6, king takes, and now rook d2. And yeah, it's a healthy pawn up. Also, again, we have this isolated pawn, but it doesn't feel so weak now. It could be weak, but it doesn't feel so weak. In the game, black played rook h8. Maybe it was also interesting to go b4 with the idea to push a5 and bishop a6 just to activate the bishop. But of course, white would have advantage. In the game, he played rook h8. Well, yes, we could just bring the king on the dark squares, but it was not so easy, because now the h4 pawn is under attack. And Capablanca played rook c2 just to enter with the rook to c7. It is not of course, it is not possible to take on h4, because after rook c7 the game is just lost for black. Bishop here, rook there, and rook a6, and with such an active rook, black would simply lose. But black went rook c8 here in order to trade the rooks. And now, of course, white could go rook d2 and try to play with the rooks on. He took on c8. And we reach this opposite card bishop's ending. That is very interesting. And in the beginning, I thought white was easily winning. But after analyzing it for some time, I changed my mind, and I think white still has chances to win, but most likely it could be a draw. Okay, I will not show you all the analysis here. In the game, white played king f2, logical move to bring the king in the center. And here black made a mistake. Why is the white king not active that much? Well, white will activate the king, but black has also ideas to create a blockade here. In the game, black played. Okay, I'll just show you the game, and then I will show you what I think is my improvement. In the game, black played d4 in order to activate his pieces, but he gave another pawn, and now there are two pawns he has two pawns down in an opposite card bishop ending. And after d4, after taking on d4, king d5, king e3, white just won descending by pushing g4 next and creating the past h4 pawn. So bishop e6. Well, he called it sacrifice, but he probably thought it was lost. a3. The ending was difficult anyway. So this is the game, and now white, okay, put the bishop to g7, and black resigns because there is no way to stop g4, h5, and creating another passed pawn. Is decisive. However, I analyzed this position, and well, it's not simple at all. But I think maybe black can hold by playing something like king e7 in order to make room for the bishop to bring the bishop to c2 or d3. d3 actually it would be a good square, d3, and then it can attack the white pawns from behind, for example. And also it would be useful for black to go a5, a4 if possible. So I'll just show you some lines, but of course it's out of the scope of this class. So for example, king e2, bishop f5, b4, bishop b1, just to put more pawns on the... Hello there. a3, f6. So you see now the bishop is well placed. g4, king f7, king d2, bishop a2, and he can put the bishop to c4, for example, and then just attack this white pawns if the white king goes further, like something like this. So okay, if he goes back, then it's he can always attack the f3 pawn. Take, and okay, now the a6 pawn is going to be lost, but black is in time to play this blockade, and even though he loses the d5 pawn, I think this position is a draw because black can defend the f5 pawn, and so if they exchange this, then here everything is blocked and this h4 pawn is controlled. And otherwise, if white yeah, easy to understand. Otherwise, if white goes g4, not to allow this bishop f5 idea, as I showed, then black can go f5 with idea, of course, to exchange one more. There were chances for a draw, and I didn't find a way to win, but maybe I missed something. Yes, the connection is okay. All right, so maybe there are some problems with the connection. I hope not. My connection seems to be fine. Okay, let's. Do you see me well? Are there? Oh, there was a short connection problem. Okay, I see. Well, it's not on my side, I mean, or I hope not. Okay, but I think now everything is fine. Okay, good to hear that. Okay, thank you guys. Let's move on to the next example, and Wojtaszek versus Fressinet. Played in 2011. So okay, we have again an ending with an isolated pawn, the d5 pawn, And here we can see that white is much more active. The knight is attacking here while black is defending. So let's see how this went. Uh, well, the first thing white should do here is to gain some space. I mean, there is nothing wrong with rook d1, rook d8, and then f3 followed by g4. But in the game, white just played g4 immediately. Black goes h6. In case of g5, the problem is that white would go knight e2, and white gets this f5 square, which is very unpleasant for black. So black avoided to play g5 for now. He goes h6. Knight d2. Knight d2. This is d2 square. Well, I don't think it works to give up the isolated pawn here. So black should just defend. I mean, if he gives the pawn, he just loses a pawn. It's not enough compensation in this position. So okay, f3, rook d8, rook d1. So now black is defending and white is attacking, but it's not possible to take the pawn, obviously. Black went g6. Also note that white doesn't have e4 because the d7 rook is defended. So e4, he can just take on e4. Okay, for now white improved the position of the king. King f2, king g7. And now he played h4. Actually, yeah, h4 is good. It has to be done, and with idea to play g5, disrupt this knight, and then take the d5 pawn. But king g3, yeah, king g3 was also to be considered because the king is better here, and then he can go h4, g5, just like that. So, well, in the game he played, as I said, he played h4. Now black changed the strategy. He played g5, and he's yeah, h4 g5, it's good, but okay, it's not so easy to do it immediately, even now, because he can take and then he has knight h7. But in the game, black played g5 with the idea to disrupt this knight, and then he can go knight g8, knight e7. Yeah, the thing is, if you go, okay, you can go knight e2 with the idea knight c3 to relocate the knight. But if you go knight e2 and knight e4, then you won't be able to attack the pawn, and he could just put the rooks on the other files. And well, the pawn is, yeah, not so good, but if you don't attack it, you cannot take it. You know. So that's why he goes h4. And here, for example, if rook c8 with the idea to get some counterplay, then black would go, white would go rook d2. I like this rook here because we defend the e3 pawn. Yes, when g5 happens, we will reroute the knight to f5, obviously. Rook d8, and now we can go king g3. For example, here not g5 because he can take a knight h7 and g5 falls. So that's why we first need to prepare this, and some move a6, I don't know. Now g5 works because we have king g4 and we defend this pawn, and rook d5 is or knight d5 is coming. So with big advantage. Yeah, that's why in the game black decided not to wait. any longer and played g5. And after pawn takes, knight e2. Well, the idea is, of course, to bring the knight to f5. It looks very good. He played knight g8. So he wants to bring the knight to e7, where it defends the d5 pawn and also controls the f5 square. So it's an interesting idea. Knight d4, knight e7. Actually, black cannot allow this knight to f5. So white went king g3. Now black goes rook h8. Well, rook h8, it has an idea, and the idea is to, as I said, once the knight is on d4, we don't really attack the d5 pawn. So the idea is to go rook d6, rook h6 with counterplay down the h5. So what do we do now? What do you think? So far so good. We maneuver the pieces, all looks fine, but we kind of stuck. So how to proceed? Rook d2, which rook? And yeah, we could do this, but as I said, at some point we need to do something. The knight is nice here, and rook 3 d2. All right. Knight to b5. Well, knight to b5. It could be in order to bring the knight to c3, but I'm not really impressed by it. Well, e4 maybe, then there is rook d6 with rook h6. b4 again, it doesn't stop rook d6, rook h6. Yeah, e4, of course, not take because of knight e6 check, not knight f5 because of knight f5 with check. But black can go rook d6 and rook h6. Rook c1. Maybe also rook c1. I don't know. It could be possible, but at some point, yeah, rook c1 also is not threatening so much. Can we exchange the knights? Well, we could, but it's not really what we want to do. So if we exchange the knights and then go for this pawn, but we would get a rook ending, and is not so clear. For example, black can go rook e7 here, and pressure on e3, or he could rook d6, rook h6. I don't know. Again, we'll check, but probably rook e7. So the time has come to push on the king side. White went f4. And we need to create a second weakness on the... Well, plenty of ideas, but at some point we need to make some progress. So it's time to push f4, and we can see that this knight on e7 is not controlling the e4 square, so the knight cannot jump to e4. If the knight was on f6, I probably wouldn't advise this f4 move. But like this, we need to push here because we have more pawns here, and we can gain some space and also create a second weakness. We need to create a second weakness. Look at this. He is well defending the weakness on d5, so we need to create some other weakness. And here black went king g6, which was not the best, but it's difficult to defend such positions. It was actually better to exchange a pawn. When you have a more difficult position, it is advisable to exchange pawns, exchange pieces, but also pawns. So here it was good to exchange these pawns, and then after a move like a6, for example, white would go rook c1, well, with advantage. But still, there is some work to win this game. For example, rook c8, rook e1, and then with the idea rook e3, f5. black's position is unpleasant, and on the long run, white can increase his advantage. Anyway, as I said, it's not easy for black to defend, and black went king g6. And here white missed a good opportunity. Can you help me with? Can you help me find this good opportunity for white? What do you think? How should we proceed here? Well, king f3, f5. Yes, f5. f5 is the... yes, in the game he played knight f3 actually. In the game he played knight f3, but f5 is just good because is with check, and then the point is if king f6, then there is knight f3 with idea e4. And of course, as I said, black had to exchange some pawns. Also, e4 could be an idea now. So rook d8. Now he can prepare it like rook d2 first. I think this is important. Rook d2, and now the idea is to go e4 finally, and black's position is very bad. For example, king g7, then yeah, f5. Yeah, f5 here, and then if king g7, then there is e4. You cannot take the pawn because of knight e6, and knight c6, just knight f3. Yeah, no good square for the black king. Yeah, this was a good opportunity. So f5 followed by knight f3 with a large advantage, probably winning. But in the game he played knight f3, and now black finally took. Yeah, like that. Took f6. So suddenly it wasn't so clear. I mean, still white has an advantage, but after f5, king f7. White looks better, but black can also defend. So here probably it was better to go knight d4 in order to bring this guy to e6 with a better position, but who knows if it's enough to win. In the game he played rook e1, rook c7. As you can see, black defended the pawn and now is activating the rooks. Knight d4, a6, rook e3, knight c6. Now he can also challenge the white knight. Knight f3, rook e7, g5. Well, here black went wrong. He probably had to take on e3, but it's not easy to allow this check. This is unpleasant position. Anyway, he took on g5. Yeah, and here white went wrong. King g4. This was wrong. What did he have to do? What did you play here? Knight g5. Yeah, knight g5 is good. Knight g5 or rook e7 was the way to go. So, for example, rook e7, knight takes. Yeah, knight takes. Knight g5 is with check. And now king f6, there is king g4, very important with idea rook e6. Probably this is what he missed, yeah. So he goes king f8. If king f8, king f4, well, white is better. The win is not guaranteed though. Anyway, in the game white played king g4, which seems logical, but is not enough because now black had a chance to make a draw. So after rook e8, rook takes, rook h1. Obviously we need to keep some rooks. Here black made the mistake. He played d4, but he had some ways. For example, rook e4, king g5, rook e3 would have made a draw because white defends the if white defends the knight, then just rook e4, and if check, then knight e5 still with a draw. But also no, not at d4. Also knight e5 and this ending could be a draw, but black should have to be precise here, like here only king e8 to prevent rook d7. So this ending is also a draw. However, this was the last move before the time control, so the 40th move, and black goes d4, just trying to get some counterplay. But now after knight g5, his position is just bad. Maybe king e8 could still be a good attempt, but he played king f6, king f4, and now you can see white took back the pawn and black's position is very unpleasant. Probably king g7 was more fighting here. He played d3. He was staking everything on this pawn, and after knight e4, king f7, rook h3, the pawn is just gone. So he lost this pawn, and then the game was pretty much over. He cannot defend like this because of check there. So he goes d2, and after rook d3 he just resigned. Okay, very interesting game and destructive. And let's move on to the next example. It's a game Ponomariov versus Vallejo Pons, played in 2003. Rapid game. Of course, we have the isolated pawn. Yes, pushing the pawn too far, but he missed some tactical opportunities there. So white has a nice position, and as I said, it's all about activity in this kind of positions. And here we can see that white's king is in the center, so the king is more active. Black's king is farther away from the center. Well, it is black to move, and black played rook c8, rook fc8, which is a good move because it clears the way for the king towards the center. Rook c8, rook c1. Okay, now is the fight for the c file. I think black's knight is better placed on c5 because it can jump to e6, for example, and challenge white's knight from d4. So black goes knight e6. He has to do it, and because what happens if king f8, for example, to just bring the king into the center? What strong move can white play here? Rook c2, very good, very good. So that's why knight e6 is important, because now Now white can go rook c2 and double the rooks, and black would lose the fight for the c file, which the c file is very important. So after losing the fight for the c file, as you can see in such a line, black's position is unpleasant here. But black played well. Black played knight e6, challenging the knight, and now rook c2 is not an option anymore. White played knight f5 here to keep the knights on the board. King f8, rook d1, logical, just to bring the last piece into play. And here black played g6. Okay, g6 was an okay move. He had another option as well, but let's say g6, it's good. Knight d6. And now, what should black do here? How to proceed? This knight is looking pretty active here. On the other hand, next move it can be attacked by the king. So rook d8, you're saying? Rook c6. Well, rook d8 would just give b7 but activate the king. But how? Okay, rook d8 would give the file, so is not so good. Not only the file, maybe white can already take on d5. Yeah, white can just take on d5, so it gives up the d5 pawn. Rook c6. Rook c6 was the good move here. You take the... Yes, he also took on c1. Change rooks and king e7. Yeah, this is what he did. He exchanged the rooks, but this is what I mean. By exchanging the rooks, he gives up the c file, and then white has an advantage because it's the activity of the pieces also. So you will see white will not necessarily win because of this d pawn, but he will win because of the activity of the pieces. Rook c6 was very strong here indeed, and it was an essential move because now black doesn't give the c file, and for example, if knight b7, he can take on c1 with rook b1 and take on b2, so no problems. And if rook c6, then just taking here, and then the knight could be trapped. So again, black was fine after rook c6. Rook d8. Well, rook d8, rook d5, king e7. I think there is rook d1, and white can move the knight the next move. So yeah, black took on c1. Rook takes, and now this is an instructive. Already black is doing bad, but king e7 is an instructive move. So how to proceed with white here? What is your move? This is the knight trapped? This is a nice tactical trick. Knight b5. You think the knight is too forward there, and you want to bring the knight home. Rook c8, very good and very nice. So knight b7, there is rook b8, and then b2 falls. It's not possible, but rook c8 is very strong, and then he has to take knight c8, and actually the a7 pawn falls, and the whole position falls apart. So yeah, that was the trick. The same if rook d8 here, the same thing, rook c8 could happen, and again with a bad position for black, because idea could be even knight b6, but knight b6, knight c7, king d4, and black cannot defend the d5 pawn. That's why black saw all this and he played d4. In order to get rid of this isolated pawn, I mean, no more troubles with the isolated pawn. We still cannot really take on b7. I think here a good move would have been rook c8, but it's a long line and I don't know, it had to be calculated till the end. It seems that white has an advantage in descending, but I'll not go into details. So in the game, white played more practical. He played b4. Idea is that now he wants to finally take that pawn on b7, since rook b8 does not attack the white pawn anymore. And here, okay, maybe this was the last opportunity for black. Black played rook b8 to defend that pawn, but that was slow. Instead, it was better to try something like a5, just to activate there. b5, now exchange, and something like a4 with idea to fix this pawn there. And it is, for example, after a move like king d3, well, there is no rook d8 because of rook c. White is better, but still there is some fight. Anyway, rook b8 looked like the normal move. But now white did as before, and after rook c8 check, rook takes, knight takes. The king ending is almost winning for white. And we can see once again, it's not just the isolated pawn, it's the activity of the pieces. Look at this. The white king is better placed here, and the knight is active and already attacking the black pawns on the queen side. So a6 in order to save that pawn. Now took on d4. The king starts pushing. Knight e6. You want to play e4. Well, e4 is not might not be such a good idea. Maybe he has knight f4 check. Need to go here, and I don't know, maybe he can activate the knight afterwards. So, or even go d3 here, and you see now after king e3 he can take on g2. Yeah, no. This is yeah, d3, yeah. Now here he took on d4, and now he is activating the king. Very important, king e4. With a large advantage for white, and I will show you the game until the end. So the thing is, white has a very active king, and the knight is well placed, and he can also push the pawn. So in the game he played h5, king e5. Look at this king. You don't even know where it's heading to. h4, knight e6. This was black's problem all along, this king. So b5, king f6, going for the f7 pawn. Now black went knight f4. If knight d8, there is h3, and as you can see, black is kind of lacking moves. For example, king g8, then g3, and g4 with a winning position. So he went knight f4, knight f7, 92, 95. But now he loses a pawn, and also the king is still very bad. He was pinning his hopes on the h pawn, but it doesn't really work. f4, and now he's not in time. He can take the h pawn, but this pawn is going to queen. King f6, knight f3, king g7. Now there is no more check anymore, and this pawn just pushes. And black resigned here. So I hope these 3 examples were instructive, and that you learned something about the isolated pawn in the ending, especially how to play with the stronger side. I repeat, first of all, it's good to block the pawn so that it cannot advance. Then exchanging some pieces, exchanging the active pieces is a good method. And let's not forget about creating a second weakness and gaining space on the king side in our case. And I want to repeat, the activity of the pieces is very important, as we saw in all the examples. Let's not forget about the activity of the pieces. So it made a difference in all these games. Okay, this is all for now. Thank you so much for watching, and see you next time. Bye bye.